Every time on Twitter I see polls that are even slightly optimistic for Kamala Harris, I see a bunch of Trumpers in the replies with blue checks next to their names usually, of course, screaming out fake polls, this is propaganda, which is so funny because were they complaining about these very same polls being fake and rigged in favor of the Democrats back when it was Biden that was in the race? No, because these same poll organizations had dismal numbers for Biden that you liked seeing. So what was the change in methodology from then to now? The only difference is, one, of course, a new candidate is in the race now. It's not just old man versus old man anymore. And thus, more potential voters are now invigorated now that a semi-fresh face is in this race now. Two, these polls are showing numbers that you simply don't like, and you've been primed for the last 8 years to just disregard everything you don't fucking like and dismiss it as fake. And it's so funny whenever new polls come out and Trumpers get mad at the results of said polls not being in their favor, because these polls are still not showing blowout numbers for Harris. From 270 to win, in the national poll, Harris leads by only 2.8%, but honestly, you can throw out the national poll, because the national poll always projects who is going to win the popular vote, and obviously this country has the electoral college, so the popular vote doesn't mean shit. Democracy, am I right? But here are polls in some swing states and other states that people are keeping a close eye on. In Arizona, Trump leads by 0.4%. In Georgia, Trump leads by 1.6%. In Michigan, Harris leads by 3.2%. In Nevada, Harris leads by 1.4%. In North Carolina, Trump leads by 0.6%. In Pennsylvania, perhaps the most consequential swing state at this point, Harris leads by only 1.6%. And then there are states like Texas and Florida where the race is actually surprisingly close. In Texas, Trump leads by 5.2%. And in Florida, Trump is only leading by 4.7 points. But honestly, I still think Florida and Texas are pipe dreams in this election cycle. They would be nice, of course, but temper your expectations. But all in all, the reason I just bashed your head with polls from several states is to make the point that this election will likely not be a blowout for either candidate. And in the swing states where Harris is leading, she's leading by such thin margins to the point where your guy could very well still fucking win. It's not like the polls are projecting that Harris is leading by like 50 points or something fucking crazy like that in these states. It all comes down to a few tens of thousands of votes in some swing states. And that's why I really don't like putting much stock in polls. The only time I ever look at them is when someone I'm following on Twitter retweets them. And I don't even look at Twitter all that much these days, so I don't really see the polls all that often. But the bottom line is, the polls are not God. Anything could happen between now and November 5th. Hillary Clinton was leading in polls at this time in 2016, and she was seen as a shoo-in, and look how that election turned out. I see a lot of Kamala supporters look at these polls and be like, we got this in the bag, when no, you don't. Again, she is leading by very thin margins in very consequential states. Hillary supporters had the same confidence when they looked at her polls, and again, look at how that election turned out. But Trump supporters are really something else. Did you see Biden voters reject polls and scream fake when he was trailing behind Trump when he was still in the race? No, you saw much of the Dem electorate admit that this guy is not fit for office. We need a new candidate ASAP, especially after that horrendous debate back in June. Of course, there were some Biden dead-enders who were saying that we need to stick with Biden, mostly out of fear of a chaotic open convention. But overall, anyone who was already going to vote Democrat this November has fallen in line with Kamala. And you had so many Dem voters saying that we can't have 4 more years of this doddering old man who very likely wouldn't live for the full 4 years if he were elected for a second term. And they were able to identify that sticking with Biden was a losing strategy. But any negative news about Trump, no matter how tangentially, oh, it's fake, I'm gonna plug my ears like a little kid and pretend it doesn't exist. At what point do you not call his most rabid base a cult? He's a man who in their eyes can't do anything wrong. All of the criminal charges slapped onto him thanks to his own criminal actions is political persecution. Everything negative about him is fake, and they tried to overturn the 2020 election results when said election didn't go his way. I know the average Trump loyalist has a severe lack of self-awareness, but do you really think the average person who isn't so politically tuned in observes this behavior and think you're well-adjusted people? And would be engaged to vote for someone who cultivates people who engage in this type of thinking and behavior? But again, self-awareness is very hard for these people, so perhaps I'm wasting breath asking that. Anyway, the election is pretty much at a deadlock at this point. It could still very well go to Trump. But unlike Trumpers, I can accept that this race is a deadlock because I don't view the candidate that I would prefer to win as a cult leader. And I don't instinctively reject data I don't like. But yeah, no, you Trumpers are totally not in a cult. That's all I have to say. Bye-bye.